So, what do the fastest growing technology and software companies do with their marketing? And how are they growing so much faster? My name is Austin McNair. I'm with Hinge, and I'm joined by Hinge's managing partner, Liz Harr. Hey, Liz, how are you doing?
Hey, Austin, I'm doing well.
Liz, we just released our 2025 high growth study where we learned that the fastest growing technology and software companies are growing 5 times faster than the rest of the competition. And we really wanted to dig in today and just look at a few key findings from that study and try to understand what are these fast growing companies doing with their marketing. Liz, this is the 10th edition of this study. I know you've been a central part of this research for so many years. How do you feel about 10 years, and what are you excited to share today about the technology companies?
I mean, 10 years, this is such an exciting milestone. You know, all of us at Hinge have worked so hard on keeping this going. It's such an important part of how today's marketers and leaders lead their companies. And it's so gratifying to hear leaders tell us how they use this research as a guidepost. So I'm super thrilled. And you were talking about the growth. I think it's really telling, like speaking of 10 years, the tech and software industry as a whole is at a 10-year low in terms of growth. So it it makes it even all the more interesting to study if there's a category of firms within that industry that are growing 5 times faster, how are they doing it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, if people want the answers to that question, they just have to keep watching this video. But also, Liz, you wrote a blog post about some of these key findings that we're going to go over today. But I want to encourage anybody that's watching the video, make sure you go to the blog post. Make sure you check out the full report too. So the full report is for sale right now on Hinge's website. That's when you're going to get all the details about the research that we've conducted on these technology and software companies, specifically those fastest growing ones. So, Liz, I want to start with the first finding, which I just find truly remarkable, right? I think every business leader that is having a conversation with their marketing department, there's always a discussion going on about how much should we be spending, right?
Yes.
What percentage of revenue should we be spending? How much? Should it increase? Should it decrease? There's always a lot going on inside that conversation. Well, one of the things we found in this year's high growth study was specifically for the technology industry, the fastest growing companies were spending twice as much on marketing as a percentage of revenue than the low growth firms. That's just a staggering and it's an outstanding fact that I saw in the research this year. Liz, what do you make of that? That the high growth firms are just investing so much more in marketing, and what does
Yeah,
that do for them?
yeah. Well, I mean, one thing it does is it makes them profitable. So not only is their growth fast, but it's profitable growth. So we found that and mapped that in the data. What are they spending on? When we dug into that, we saw that by and large, the high growth firms have larger marketing teams. So they're investing more in that discipline and that kind of that role within their firms. Number two, they are very serious about their digital maturity and the extent to which they leverage the learnings from their analytics to pressure test what they're doing, change, make course corrections, or even do more of the same if it's working. So they're very good about that, but they're making investment in that tech stack. And number three, they're outsourcing to specialized skill sets. So they're what we found, and we found this dynamic with professional services overall, that high growth category, they tend to outsource things that they are not the specialist in. So SEO, website design, video production, these hard skills that are very expensive to grow internally, they're outsourcing those. So it looks like that's where they are spending when they spend twice as much. But I just want to point out it seems like a wise investment because not only is the growth fast, it's profitable.
That's so interesting. And Liz, another area that might kind of add some more color to this, like where are they spending? It was our second point that we called out, and that you brought up in the research. We looked at the top marketing priorities of the fastest growing technology and software companies, and the number one priority this year was content creation. Now, this has been, I think, a top the list now for a couple of years. I think anybody in professional services marketing knows that we need to be making content. We need to be leading with content and draw more interest to our companies and specifically the expertise of our companies. What do you think about the technology industry though, and the kind of content that they create and the investments they're making there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to see that prioritization around content because when you think about it, your people are behind the expertise that is being sold and then bought. So what better way to give your audience a flavor for what it's like to work with you than to have those people author well-written, informative, educational thought leadership? That's what it's all about. Not fluffy 200-word little blurbs that are AI produced, but I'm talking about in-depth, very well researched, well supported, and documented content that gets at the heart of what your audience is grappling with. And that's what these high growth firms are doing. So they're not just producing content, it's a specific kind of content. And then the second thing, Austin, is where are they disseminating it? Well, we also saw in that same data set that they are prioritizing networking on social media, which is primarily LinkedIn, and disseminating their thought leadership there. And I bring that up because how many times do you and I both see where firms will have great websites with great content, and then you go to their LinkedIn profiles and you don't even see any of it there.
Yeah.
High growth firms are making that connection. They're producing the content, they're housing it in multiple places so that their audiences can see it.
Yeah, Liz, I love the point that you made there, especially about that. Well, you touched on a little bit about bringing the thought leaders into the picture of the marketing program. We talk about this all the time, but I think sometimes when we have conversations with our technology and software clients, there's almost this idea that no, the product is most important, right? And it's the technology that really people care about and see. Well, I mean, the data shows that, while that might, while there might be some truth in there, especially like, truth people have from the experiences they have in business development, the data is also showing us that the high growth firms are not shy about bringing those people more visibility and having them contribute to that thought leadership content as well. That was actually the second highest marketing priority for these fastest growing firms as well.
Yep.
So, Liz, the third thing I wanted to ask you about is your point about how high growth tech firms are putting special emphasis on research. One of those pieces that I'm most interested in hearing about is the competitive research. I've seen all the different industry breakdowns, and I think that this industry in particular, competitive research being number one, was unique for the industry. But tell us about kind of how you see technology and software firms using research to their advantage, because they are doing this much more than the low growth firms that we studied.
That's right. So the thing about competitive research is high growth firms are not, producing the standard quadrants that we see and making up scenarios about where they fit in vis-a-vis the competition. They're doing way more than that. What they're really studying and they've become really good at is understanding what is my audience exposed to when they're out there learning. That's why you need to pay attention to the competitive landscape. Even if you are super convinced that you don't have many competitors, you do, because there are multiple entities out there who are at least claiming to do what you do. And it doesn't take much to, uh, stand up a website and put up a good couple of phrases on there. And then, audiences don't know until they've hired you that they hired the wrong firm. So, all to say that high growth firms are doing a really good job of studying the competitive landscape for the purpose of understanding what is my audience exposed to when they're out there learning, what messages, what promises, etc., and how am I going to differentiate and stand above all of those noisy messages. So that's really what it's all about when they're looking at the competition.
Yeah, and I can tell you from experience, Liz, and I think we've been on. You may remember this. I think we were on the same exact client call, where we were in a meeting with one of our clients, and we were going through some competitive research that we did with them. And I was showcasing kind of this one competitor that had been highlighted in the research we did. This was a competitor that our client hadn't really been that familiar with, but they were brought up multiple times in the research. And when we went to the kind of website and the materials that this competitor had, it looked really good. It looked really sharp. And our client had no clue that
Mhm.
these people were that they like really existed, or that they were as much of a force or at the top of people's minds as they thought. It just goes to show that like studying the competitive landscape, if you think you know it, there might be some stones that have been left unturned, and it seems like those high growth firms are really leaning into that space.
Yeah, that's for sure. And just one quick thing, it's not just making a list of competitors you know about and then going online and look. Like to your point, you really need to use tools to see who is showing up for phrases that my audience would potentially use when they're out there looking for people like me. That's how you find what you're talking about. And I just want to make that distinction, because if you're just coming up with a list of people you know about, you're probably getting like 10% of what you need to know.
That's right. That's right. So we've talked about how the high growth firms, they're spending more on marketing. We've talked about how content creation is a top priority, and specifically with a little bit of that thought leadership flavor, right? Bringing the thought leaders to the forefront. And then we've made this point about research, and specifically the emphasis that high growth tech companies are putting on competitive research and staying on top of the marketplace and where buyers are going, and who are some other players in the field. Liz, what other things would you want to highlight as we kind of wrap up here? What would you tell these tech marketers out there today about this changing landscape and kind of what they should be thinking about?
I think there's two things I would leave everybody with. One is we're talking about the frequency with which high growth firms do research, and competitive research is at the top. The second contender, and it's not much further behind doing competitive research, is client research. So high growth firms are studying the competitive landscape. They are studying their audience's lens, learning behavior, buying behavior, decision making behavior. That is everything, because what that enables those firms to do is say, given the external messaging that's out there and the choices my audience has, and given what keeps my audience up at night and how they articulate those problems, I now know how to show up in not just a differentiated way, but a meaningfully differentiated way. So that is number one. Number two is we talked about research. Well, another aspect of research, and this gets to the type of content that high growth firms are creating, is high growth firms are investing in doing original research. And they're using that as the foundation for all this amazing content that they produce. So I would leave, I think a lot of times I hear, well, how am I supposed to produce all this content? Consider doing something that nobody else can replicate. If you do original research, it's yours. Others can't replicate it. So I would just leave people with that.
I think those are great notes. If you are watching, please make sure you like and subscribe to the video. Go follow Liz on LinkedIn as well. Liz posts some great stuff. She has a weekly newsletter that she publishes every week, oftentimes speaking directly towards the technology and software marketplace. But for the research itself, like I said, this research report is available right now for purchase. Just visit our website, hingemarketing.com. You'll find all of the resources, guides, webinars, blogs, everything's on there for you to use and help you be successful at your firm. For Austin and Liz, this has been another great video. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.